Good morning, guys. It's Mr. Wupker here. We're in week 2 of chapter 17. Remember to highlight your answers to the PowerPoint check on your notes. I'm going to try and be a little more excited today because like 87 of you guys sound like I sound like a dead dog. Um, so I'm sorry about that. I will be a little more excited. Our EQ for this week is why did communism spread to Asia? We're going to spend the next couple of weeks looking at wars in Vietnam and Korea. So we're going to learn about the spread of communism into the Asian area. So China is really where communism started in Asia. China is the first Asian country to become communist. Before World War II, China was having a civil war between a nationalist leader who was like a dictator named Chiang Kai-shek and a man named Mao Zedong who is a communist leader. Chiang Kai-shek is the guy on the left. Mao Zedong, my head's covering up most of him, but he is a communist leader in China. They are fighting for power over China before World War II, and then after World War II, this fight continues, where Mao Zedong, the communist leader, is able to beat Chiang Kai-shek and his people, and he kicks them off of China to this island called Taiwan, where they will live. And Mao ends up expanding China into parts of India, and with him that spreading communist ideas. So the U.S. begins to be very afraid about Mao Zedong, and they see him as another Stalin, and they're afraid that he will spread communism even further. So America decides they need to find a way to stop the spread of communism. So when Mao Zedong takes over China, he wants everybody to move from the farms to the big cities, so that way they can work in factories and increase production. The problem with that, though, is that there are millions of people in China. China is the largest country in the world, and so when you take people off of farms, there's not as much food to be produced, and so because of that, Mao takes the food that is on farms and he gives it to the people in the city because he wants people to live in the city, and so because he does this, he causes millions of people to starve. Mao Zedong and communism as a whole has killed more people than any other ideal in the world. Um, and so in order to fix this, Mao Zedong offers this thing called the Great Leap Forward, and basically his idea is that people will live on these giant farms that will make food for the people that live in the cities, and while they're on the farms, they will be forced to work, but they will live together in what he thinks is like a perfect harmony. So people have to live together, work together, learn about the political party, the Communist Party together. It takes away any idea of a family, and the government becomes your family now. So people live on these communes. His goal is to make it easier for people to survive, but he does not do so, and millions of people continue to starve because China does not make enough food to provide for everybody. So because famines were killing millions of people in China, the country asked him to step down, or the leaders of the country asked him to step down. Until he did, there's like a board that took over China, so a bunch of people worked together to run China. Um, and so China, in order to try and expand, becomes less strict about their communism. They don't make people live on these commune farms anymore. Um, but a lot of the rich students who liked communism protested this, and they created this army called the Red Guard. So basically, the Red Guard began to protest against the Chinese government. They actually burnt down some of the Chinese governmental like buildings and demanded that Mao come back to China. And so Mao was put back in charge. And then they said, "Oh no, the issue with China isn't famine. The issue is that we need to purify our country and get rid of the people who do not like communism." And so basically, anybody who speaks out or protests against the government, the Chinese government, especially Mao, will be killed. The Red Guard goes around and basically kills millions of people who they believe do not agree with Chairman Mao and his ideas. So another Asian country that was taken over by communism during World War II, or around the time of World War II, was North Korea, or Korea as a whole. So the United States fought against Japan, which is just below the green part where it says South Korea. And so at the end of the war, when Germany surrendered, Russia took all their troops and ran them over to the other side of their country to fight against the Japanese people. Um, and so they invaded into the northern part of Korea. And so when Japan surrendered, they gave up that land uh, to the Soviet Union. But they only got half of Korea because the United States did not want them to have all of Korea, um, because then the whole country would be communist. But um, Russia wanted Korea because it was a buffer zone. It created space between them and the rest of the world. So they kept North Korea, and this divided the country of Korea into two. So there was North Korea, which was the communist side, and South Korea, which was the democratic side, or the non-communist side. And it was divided along this line on a map called the 38th parallel. So the 38th parallel divided what used to be one country, Korea, into two, North and South Korea. So even though the world agreed to separate Korea into North and South Korea, Russia didn't stick to that plan for very long. So in about 1949, the Soviet Union sent tanks to North Korea and said, "Hey, you can have these, use them for whatever you want." And everybody knew that North Korea wanted to invade South Korea. So this became a threat to South Korea, and it became a threat to the idea of spreading communism even further into Asia. And so, in response, actually, sorry, let me go back. So, June 25th, 1950, even though the Soviet Union swore they weren't sending tanks for North Korea to invade South Korea, guess what happened? You got it right. North Korea invaded South Korea. They went below the 38th parallel, which you can see in the map above me. It's the line that separates North and South Korea. And so basically, they pushed um, North Korea all the way down to where that little yellow blob is at the bottom of the screen. They took over all that extra land. So, in response, the United Nations, which we talked about at the end of World War II, the United Nations is a group of countries that work together to keep peace in the world, got together and said that they were going to fight against the spread of communism in South Korea. Until they sent Douglas MacArthur, who was crazy, dude. He was this crazy World War II leader who was running Japan at the time. He was an American general. They sent him to have a surprise attack on the Soviet Union and on North Korea, and he was successful. He pushed people all the way back to China. If you see the yellow lines up there, the yellow arrows, that is how far the general was able to take over land. He ended up invading all the green territory there. China sent troops in to North Korea to fight against Douglas MacArthur. He was able to hold his ground for a while, but he wanted to spread even further. He wanted to go all the way into China and defeat the communists all the way into China and Russia. So, like I said on the last slide, um, the UN troops under Douglas MacArthur are able to push the war all the way back to China. So basically, they took over all of Korea, and then China joined the war, which caused trouble for the troops because China had millions of soldiers. So if you send millions of soldiers to a war, you are not able to hold your ground. Douglas MacArthur ended up not being able to defeat the Chinese army because there were so many soldiers. He was pushed back to the 38th parallel. Where there's basically was what's called a stalemate. So neither side was able to push each other any further back. It's a stalemate. If you say the word stalemate to me on Friday, I will give you 5 extra points. The first one to say it to me will get 5 extra points. The word is stalemate. So he caused this stalemate, and then was not able to push any further. So both sides were like stuck in the middle, trying to fight at each other. The war stopped there, but neither side was willing to actually end the war. So it was super cold in Korea that year. People were dying left and right because of the cold. People were tired of war, and so in 1951, or sorry, 1952, both sides basically decided to end the war to draw, but they didn't actually end the war. They created what was called an armistice or a ceasefire, so they agreed to not shoot at each other, and in return they never picked up the war again. Millions of people died in the Korean War, and all for nothing because the border now between North Korea and South Korea is the exact same border that it was before the war. We created a little zone in between the two countries called a demilitarized zone. I'm going to show you pictures of it later. And in that zone, nobody has ever stepped foot since the war. So South Korea is now a free democracy. North Korea is still a crazy communist country today. And both sides believe that they should take over the other, but they won't do so because they don't want to die. The picture up above is a funny story. Um, so these two flagpoles are the largest flagpoles in the world. They are on the demilitarized zone. Basically, what happened is there are still armed guards on the demilitarized zone for both sides. So after the war, South Korea, which is the white flag on the right, built a flagpole to put their flag on. North Korea, in response, built a bigger flagpole. And so in response, South Korea built a flagpole that was bigger than them, and then North Korea was like, we can't let them have a bigger flagpole, so they built a bigger flagpole, and back and forth, they built bigger and bigger flagpoles until finally South Korea gave up. So the first and second largest flagpoles are on the demilitarized zone, with North Korea being the winner. So if anything, they can say they have the biggest flagpole in the world. Way to go, North Korea! 10 points. You also don't have food, so that sucks. Um, Here we see a picture of the demilitarized zone. Uh, Guards from both sides stand guard 24/7 to make sure that nobody invades the other country. So that little concrete barrier in the middle is the line that separates North and South Korea. This is the only entrance in between the two countries, and it is guarded all day and all night by both American and Korean troops to make sure that nobody invades uh, each other. So a little bit more about North Korea. After the war, Kim Il Sung um, basically became the leader of North Korea. He was paid off by the Russian military to run the country. He tried to make it a powerful nation, to make factories out of, and he was successful for a little bit because he was funded by the Russians, but he is super corrupt and he keeps most of the money for himself. So because of that, the country is now basically bankrupt. But they have nuclear weapons, which means nobody can invade them. Because if you invade North Korea, they drop a nuke on you, everybody falls apart. So America is still in discussions with North Korea today to give up their nuclear weapons and hopefully become a democracy. Um, President Trump actually had a meeting with Kim Il Sung's great grandson now, Kim Jong Un, or sorry, Kim Jong Il is the newest president of, or supreme leader of North Korea. Um, but the nation is dirt poor, and they actually believe that the Kim family, Kim Il Sung, is a god and that he killed a dragon. I kid you not. They really believe that Kim Il Sung killed a dragon. It's crazy stuff that goes on in North Korea. A little more about the craziest country to ever exist, North Korea. They have a boat in their fleet called the USS Pueblo. That's right, USS as in United States ship. In the 1970s, we had a monitoring ship off their coast. It had no like tanks or guns on it. It was just a ship that we were using to make a map out of the ocean. The North Koreans saw that and they thought it'd be a good opportunity to mess with America and prove how amazing and great they are. So they invaded the ship and they kept it. So the USS Pueblo is still an active American ship that we do not have control of. It is actually a part of the North Korean fleet right now. It's the only ship to not be in control, or an only American ship to not be in control by America. Um, it is also the most technologically advanced ship in the North Korean fleet, and we had it in the 1960s. It was made in World War II, and it is a better ship than they own. That's pretty sad. Um, so at this point, I think we just sort of give it to them as a gift. But they're crazy. They think they're better than America, and that they're going to blow up the world. So they like to show it off as the pride and joy of their fleet. Like I said earlier, the Kim family has run uh, North Korea since the Korean War. The newest member of this crazy Kim family is named Kim Il Sung. It's the big chubby kid in the middle right there. This guy has basically been raised a millionaire his whole life. He is insane. The stuff that he has done is evil, and this happens still today. Kim Il Sung has murdered his uncle who spoke up against him. He literally fed him to dogs, and he continues to hold evil control over North Korea. He believes that he is the supreme